What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, August 17th, 2017 here, and sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday. And I'm going to apologize up front. I seem to have picked up a rather nasty head cold, so I'm going to be hitting the volume cut-off button here because I'm sneezing and coughing and all kinds of stuff. But so that's what's going on over here. Okay, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air. And obviously the big story now is this terror attack over in Barcelona. Terror, 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 terror. And apparently this individual drove this white van deliberately up on the sidewalk, hit a crowd, 13 dead, more than 30 injured, and then supposedly there was a hostage crisis, then there wasn't, and supposedly the perpetrators were holed up in a restaurant, then they weren't, and then they said the driver had run away, and he encountered the police, and they tried to arrest him, and they shot and killed him. How very, very convenient. So basically, at this point, I hereby demand that President Trump come on out and denounce white van supremacy. Because if he doesn't come out and denounce white van supremacy, then he should be impeached here. Now, according to a still unnamed terrorism monitoring organization, ISIS is supposedly taking credit for this. So this is feeling like another attempt to get ISIS to be the villains, and, oh, we have to go get ISIS no matter where they are, and, well, right now they're in Syria. And the interesting thing is it's come on out. The CIA actually warned Spanish police that this resort area, Les Ramblas, was a likely terror attack target 2 months ago. Now, the guy who they think was the driver, who's now dead, was a migrant, but he was a legal Spanish citizen. And apparently they're still trying to dig into all of that. But ISIS is taking credit. And interestingly enough, they're saying, we inspired the guy. Anyway, let's get on back to this aftermath of Charlottesville, because it's still out there. They're still pounding on it as hard as they can. And Paul Joseph Watson had a very excellent observation. It's simply stunning that the media and the political class is trying to pretend that the last 18 months of Antifa, Black Lives Matter violence just didn't happen. Remember all the snowflakes after Hillary lost the election? They were out there in the streets of all these cities, and they were tearing the place up, even in cities that Hillary had won, which showed a certain lack of coordination there. And apparently over on CNN, Van Jones literally broke into tears over President Trump blaming both sides. And if you look at the videos from Charlottesville, yes, both sides initiated violence. Both sides were fighting. And if you want to look for an initiating event, it's the teardown of the Confederate statues. And so these people who are respectful of history went on in to defend the statues, to protest the teardown of the statues, and Antifa and Black Lives Matter showed up smuggling weapons in ice chests. If you want to really be honest, you want to say it was Antifa and Black Lives Matter who are responsible for the violence, just like that altercation out in California at a police station, or the fact that they literally crashed the funeral of this one woman who supposedly died, and they walked in with bats and just started hitting people. Yeah, they're the instigators of the violence. But the conventional wisdom in Washington, D.C. is, oh, no, the blacks and the browns, they're always the victims. You can never find fault with them. It's always those white people, those evil white people. We've got to just demonize them. And it is rather silly. Donald Trump is accurate. Both sides are to blame. And if you look at the videos, it's very, very obvious. Nobody gave peace a chance, including the police. The police just jammed these two crowds together and then stood back. They let it happen. The violence in Charlottesville was deliberately orchestrated and engineered by the mayor of Charlottesville, Michael Steiner, and Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, who's a long, long time Clinton crony. That's what's going on. And let us not forget that the guy who put together Unite the Right, Jason Kessler, before he did this, we're going to organize the right, he was an Obama supporter. He was involved with the Occupy movement. He's a plant. He set up this organization to lure conservatives in, to set them up to be humiliated and embarrassed and sabotaged. It's right out of the COINTEL playbook. And now that convenient witness, the first witness to speak to the news media about the event was this Brennan Gilmore. Turns out he worked in Africa as the U.S. State Department Foreign Service officer before leaving to manage the campaign of Tom Perello for Virginia governor. And guess who was funding that campaign? George Soros. This whole thing stinks to high heaven. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. And we're going to take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Boy, Van Jones must be going through a lot of Kleenex because it seems like he really cares about all those inner-city blacks that kill each other. Is he cheering an eye for those guys?
No, he isn't. You know what they're out there trying to do is basically caricature all Trump supporters as white supremacists and racists to make people embarrassed to vote for the Republican Party in next year's elections.
You know, the bodies aren't even cold yet in Barcelona, and CNN is already, it's all Trump's fault. You know, the moon landing crash, you know, Trump's fault. This is Trump's fault. It's Putin's fault. It's Trump's fault. It's Putin's, it's duck season. It's crazy. I mean, you know, Mike, you know what's scary? I've seen some unedited pictures from the Barcelona. I've seen baby stroller crushed. I've seen some really bad pictures, Mike.
Yes.
It's bad over there. You know, but you know one thing I didn't notice? I didn't notice any of those people having bats, pipes, and 2x4s and concrete-filled water bottles.
Yes.
I didn't notice that. You know, yeah, that Charlotte was a setup. And there's another rally coming up in, I believe, in Lexington, Kentucky. I suggest stay home.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, they're hiring these people to go on out there and basically stage a fight for the TV news cameras. You know, we're starting to hear from all kinds of people who have been demonized in the media that, yeah, they got suckered. They get called up by a TV network and they say, we want to do a story about you. And then they come on in and they try and stage manage and just get any footage they can that demonizes the person. When it finally comes on out and it's fully edited, it makes them look really, really bad and stupid. And it's one of the reasons why, by and large, I turn down all requests for interviews and documentaries. The last one I did was the History Channel, and I was very nervous about doing that because, again, all the way back, the New York Times was out there trying to say that I claimed that there was proof of ancient civilizations on Mars. I mean, that's how desperate they are to smear us. But History Channel's America's Book of Secrets actually did a very good job of what they were talking about, and I came off looking really good. So did all the other guests who were there being interviewed, including Alex Jones. He's on there as well. So that was a very positive experience. But these days, I'm absolutely terrified of anybody in the corporate media coming on up and saying, we're going to do a story about you. We're going to make you look really good, because they never do. They never do.
You know, Mike, one thing that they can do with these false flags, you know, some are false flags, some are not. I don't know, but you know, they can hire crisis actors, bring them all there, and then get somebody to run over them, you know, or they can just have a suicide bomber that, you know, like an ISIS character, blow himself up because, you know, they're all easy pickings from, like, Saudi Arabia, I guess, right?
Yes.
Or, you know. Well, I mean, that's the different ways they can do it. You know, let's bring these crisis actors in, and then we'll get somebody to drive over them, and then they'll turn, you know, then they'll use that against Trump. You know, it's all propaganda. You know, it's sad.
Well, you know, there's some drone footage that's come on out from that whole car incident, and from the street level, it looked like there was a massive crowd there, but from the overhead view on the drone, they literally were crowded into the intersection to make it look like it was crowded, and you go another couple of feet in any direction, it's absolutely empty. Absolutely empty. It was being staged, man.
You know what the biggest joke is? They said it was too dangerous. What all these police officers get all these weapons and riot gear for then? You know, I mean, come on. Anybody believe that crap? You know, oh, it's too dangerous. Then what do you got all this riot gear dressed up like stormtroopers from Star Wars? You know, I mean,
they're getting all these surplus military hardware from the U.S. government. Yeah, don't tell me that you're afraid and you're running away. I mean, we knew that was a crock out at the Rodney King riots when the trial came back on those police officers and they were all declared not guilty. And we all knew there were going to be riots, and sure enough there were. And the riots got going, and the LAPD just ran like heck, saying, oh, we're afraid, we can't deal with this. But, you know, they had those armored vehicles back then. They had the bulletproof vests. They wanted the thing to get out of control. And we later found out that this was all a big government operation. It was called, the code names were Garden Plot and Cable Splice. And it was all there to just, you know, again, manipulate the minds of the American people. And so is this. And so is Barcelona.
Yeah, if they don't think people don't think that governments won't kill their own citizens for power and control, they just don't know history. Thanks, Mike.
You're absolutely right there. Government would kill off 1/4 of every single living American as long as it made the surviving 3/4 obedient slaves. We're going to go to James in South Carolina. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I was wondering, have they given a reason why they removed the statue of the monument of Roger Toney in Baltimore?
They're basically saying anybody who had any connection with the Confederacy, the statue is gone. And
Roger Toney was Supreme Court Justice of the United States. He was not. It's not a Confederate symbol. He was not in the Confederacy. He was the Chief Justice when the Dred Scott decision was made.
Well, that may be the link,
but nothing to do with the Confederacy.
Yeah, I mean it's getting ridiculous out there. Where basically the rationale now is they want to tear down absolutely everything that was built with slave labor, which, if you look at your history, includes the U.S. Capitol building, Wall Street, Trinity Church, UNC Chapel Hill, Monticello, the Castillo de San Marcos down there in Florida, Mount Vernon, the University of Virginia, the Washington and Lee University, and so forth and so on. Now, if you look at the list of important places built with slave labor, most of them will include the White House, and that's not historically accurate. Yes, there were slaves working on the White House, but in order to incentivize them to do the best job they could, they were actually paid. And that's a little detail of history that a lot of these people out there saying, oh, the White House was built with slave labor, we should tear it down. No, the slaves who worked in the White House were actually being paid in order to encourage them to do a really good job. And by the way, let's be honest, there's almost nothing of the original White House left there anyway. It's constantly being rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt, and I think there's like one section of the exterior wall in one corner on the ground level that is the only remaining piece of the White House as known by people like John Adams. And it's been completely gutted and renovated and rebuilt, and they dig down and put on all that stuff down in the basement. The White House that you see today has almost nothing to do with the White House that was built back in the 1700s. And that's another reality.
Well, Ulysses S. Grant owned a slave.
Yes.
He was the last president. Grant was the last president ever that had been a slave owner. And also his wife owned slaves, and those slaves that his wife owned were not freed until the 13th Amendment did it. Do you think they might close Grant's tomb in New York?
Well, yeah, there you are. I mean, they're just out there. Anything built by slaves, we're going to tear it down. Hey, the pyramids were built by slaves. Let's nuke those things right now.
Okay. That's all I had, Michael. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to switch to Don in Iowa. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
First, I want to compliment you. Your bumper music is good. I like that one, especially. I can't get no work. I can't draw no pay. Unemployment getting worse every day. Who is that guy?
I think you're talking about The Panic Is On. And
yeah, who is that guy?
Yeah, that's a guy. Oh, I have to go back in my memory. I mean, it's from the 1930s. And if you go to WRHradio.com, which is the web page devoted to this show, halfway down there's a link, the music from the What Really Happened radio show, and there's a little player in there where you can go on in and, what the heck, let me just do this right now, radio.com. We'll skip on down there, and I'm blanking on the name, but he was a very famous folk music recording artist of the day.
Yeah.
And
not Woody Guthrie.
No, it's not Woody Guthrie. It's not Woody Guthrie. It is. Let me just look in here. Whoops. Whoop. Boy, it's kind of crazy here.
That doesn't matter anyway. I just wanted to tell you your music is good, and I like that. But we'll track it down later on. It's okay.
Okay, Hezekiah Jenkins is his name.
Hezekiah Jenkins. Okay. Well, what I want to talk about is Trump. Yeah, this whole thing now, the press is so excited. They're going to put the pressure on Trump. They're going to get rid of him, but they can't get rid of him. There's no way, unless he wants to leave. He might just say, "I've had enough. I just go play golf and hell with it." But
now, wait a minute. If push comes to shove, they can do the John F. Kennedy approach on him.
I don't think they will. I don't think they're going to shoot.
I wouldn't put it past them. I wouldn't put it past them.
They could shoot. He could be shot. Yeah, that's true. He could be assassinated.
Look, I mean, apparently the Secret Service is already on the case of this Missouri state senator who tweeted on out, "We got to assassinate Donald Trump." And look at how many dead bodies lie in the wake of the Clintons. You think one more is going to bother them? That they're even going to hesitate if they think they can get away with it?
Yeah. I don't think they'll assassinate. It's not easy to assassinate a president. A lot of people want to assassinate every president, especially Obama when he first got elected. People want to assassinate him. They don't do it. It's not that easy. But
most of the people out there saying, "I want to assassinate somebody," this or that or anything, they're just mouthing off. And anybody who seriously is thinking about assassinating a leader, they're not going to telegraph it. They're not going to advertise it. And everybody who's out there casually talking about, "Oh, I'm going to kill this person or that person and everything," they're obviously somebody who's never actually killed somebody because it's not as easy to do as you think. And it's not as easy to live with afterwards, unless you're a total psychopath.
He's going to stay there. He's going to stay there for at least 4 years, and then he has a choice. It looks like to me like all of these people that don't like him now are resigning in protest. They're starting already. These business leaders. Mm-hmm. He said, "Bye-bye. Don't let the door hit you." And he can say that to everybody. You should just call a meeting. Anybody that doesn't like me, get the hell out of here. We'll hire Mike Rivero to be the communications director or whatever.
I want NASA. I want to be the head of NASA. And my first order is going to be to order all the ground crews to dress up like apes every time an astronaut returns to Earth.
Okay, but then 4 years from now, he doesn't need the Republican Party. He could start 2 years ahead of time to start his own party.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the GOP is deserting Donald Trump. The Democrats are out for his head on a spike. And frankly, I think Trump needs to get much more assertive. Again, he tried to come into the White House. He wanted to be magnanimous in victory. He sort of thought politics is a lot like business, and it isn't. It's a completely different animal. And he should have just scraped out that White House and executive office building, right down to the bare walls and said, "All of you Obama holdovers and you inside players, you are gone." And he should have staffed up his administration with qualified people who can do the job, but who are from outside the Beltway and do not come into the job with all these compromising connections that the people he has now. I mean, the turnover there at the White House is so rapid these days. They got a banner out front now saying, "Now hiring." And at this point, hardly anybody wants to apply. I
think he is starting. He's starting to get more assertive, and he did on this Charlottesville thing.
He needs to get those presidential brass knuckles on right now. Yeah. Okay.
He's starting, and he has no choice. That's all he can do.
Okay, we've got to let you go. We got to do a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go right back to the telephones here. Sherry in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. When it comes to ignoring rights through lies and all this and displacing what doesn't work for the rich and and doing things in the name of greed. And I realize this goes really back to Mount Rushmore in South Dakota. Now, if I'm not mistaken, was a really, I guess, sacred place where the Native Americans could honor their ancestors.
Yes.
And it was taken over through lies, maybe war, deceit, and their rights ignored, I'm sure, in the process. I mean, this is now we see up there Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Roosevelt. Is there a fifth one?
No, there's only the four, but they're already talking about going on up there and knocking off Washington and Jefferson for owning slaves, and Teddy Roosevelt because he's a racist, although they're a little less clear on how he got that label. And that would leave Lincoln up there, and of course I have a problem with that because the reality is he lied the nation into the Civil War. It was never really about slavery. It was about tax revenues.
I mean, it seemed kind of ironic. I mean, if that's the right word, it's just sort of weird. And now they're lying about our history and wanting to displace us because it's and ignoring our rights for their purposes. And I'm kind of beginning to see the enemy as someone that takes away what works for the people and replacing it with what works for the monopolies or the globalists or something like
absolutely.
that.
It's like when they voted through the Federal Reserve System. But I'll tell you what's really ironic. We're running the risk of a whole new civil war over this issue of erasing the monuments of the last Civil War. That's irony for you.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's really weird how far back this goes. I mean, maybe we're going to halt that outrageous behavior that dates so far back in time. Wouldn't it be great if, in a way, if it did collapse and the people could just pull together and we could, I mean, what a turnaround from all that history behind us and our rights, our privacy, our rights, and all this are only beginning to be ignored. When I think of what goes on in grocery stores, they're trying to get me to check out my own stuff. Well, never mind, you can use your check. We have little people in the tower up there that'll check into your bank for you. And the communication things, that are going on, wanting to get us all on these phones and everything. It's just like it's just beginning this whole thing through deceit to get rid of what doesn't work for them. You know what I mean? It's really weird. So I just thought I'd kind of put it in a long time perspective.
Well, it's all about forcing us into dependence on their system. And, of course, that is how slavery is imposed on a population throughout history. That's what King George III was doing to the American colonists. And, of course, we all know how that wound up being resolved. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Russ in Minnesota. I think it's Minnesota or Montana, one of the two here. Minnesota. Russ in Minnesota, what's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I wanted to say, no matter what channel you turn on, no matter which media outlet you turn on, you're going to hear the words white nationalist, Nazi, KKK, and you're going to hear about slavery, and you're going to hear about blacks, Black Lives Matter. But can you please tell me why the issue that Jews brought the blacks here never comes up? Am I a hater for thinking that nobody out there will ever bring that fact up?
Well, actually, we had an article about that very topic on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com this morning. And, the reality is that, whites did not enslave the blacks. Africa in that day and age saw a lot of tribal warfare. One tribe would make war on another, and the victors would enslave the losers, and it was Africans selling the African slaves to the Jewish slave traders. And that's something that hardly anybody ever talks about. Anyway, Russ, I got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And following up on Russ's comments here, I feel I need to say something. This obsession with the slavery of the antebellum South Again, it is something that happened in the past. No white person alive today in the United States of America has ever owned a slave. No black person alive today in the United States of America has ever had to pick cotton. But the reality is we are all, white or black, brown, red, peach, taupe, mauve, plaid, slaves anyway. To the Internal Revenue Service, to the Federal Reserve, to the IMF, to the military-industrial complex, to the medical-industrial complex. We do not have the freedom to be independent. We are forced to buy and use certain products, to surrender our money for things we don't really want. And that really is an ideal definition of slavery, that your work product is taken away from you and you get nothing in return that you want. But this obsession with the slavery of the antebellum South is being fanned up to divide the American people against each other so that we don't unite together against the slavery that is happening in front of us right now today. You think about that for a while. And by the way, I'm getting nasty emails from everybody saying, well, you're a beneficiary of slavery. Your ancestors owned slaves. No, my ancestors ran a station on the Underground Railroad. Now, getting on back to the phones. Hatchie from Hatch 3, I guess. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. How are you today?
I'm doing fine.
Hey, it's good to see your show every day. I've been a listener since probably 2005, 2006, whenever you went live with a screen. I think your show a lot. You're a lot of the time on the money, most of the time. Well, you know, I just was going to say, Mike, I wouldn't, if I were you or anyone out there in your listening audience, be surprised if one of these mornings or late evenings we're waking up or going to sleep on a message like they're going to ban all currency because it's got pictures of slave-owning old white people on all the dollars and stuff. I mean,
You're there.
If I don't die from rage or die from laughter, I'll call you back if that happens.
That's a good that's a good one. That's how they're going to bring about the cashless society. Oh, those are slave owners on those notes. Actually, that's not true. I don't think Ben Franklin owned any slaves.
Well, he probably didn't need to.
Lincoln didn't.
The smartest head of the bunch.
Lincoln didn't own any slaves. Washington and Jefferson. I don't know about Alexander Hamilton.
But you know that with Lincoln, there's some correspondence going around with his secretary and others, where he makes his feelings well known about what he thinks of blacks, or better yet, just slaves in general, in that station in life, whatever. And I've read them before. There's a lot of real naughty letters running around that he wrote just out of love for other people. Let's just call it that.
Yeah, we published that. We posted that rather on whatreallyhappened.com, I think, yesterday. But the reality is Lincoln only took up the issue of freeing the slaves as a device to get the Union to go and reconquer the South. And in his private communications, he had indicated that he thought blacks were inferior, that they should not be allowed to have the same rights to vote and property that the whites did. And he was quoted at one time as saying that if he could have held the Union together by leaving the blacks slaves, he would have done so. The slaves were freed as an incidental effect of his attempt to bring the Union back together and bring those Southern tax revenues back to the Washington, D.C. coffers. The irony there is that without the advantage of the slave labor force, the Southern plantations were forced to hire people to work in the cotton fields or everything else, and as a result, their profits went down, and so did the tax revenues coming out of the South.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. I mean, and with history, without blinders on, we can see this. You know, because everything does get a return in the world. I mean, in all of life, it would appear that everything gets its return, and this is one of those incidents. I don't know if there was ever an age of stupidity or of only emotions, trumping every thoughtful thing. But, man, this is really something. I mean, this isn't the same country I was born in, and I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. It's just, it blows my mind at what this, at least generation, it would seem, last couple generations, are taken for real. It's like trying to make things real compared to what their ideas are whacked. And I mean, I'm not trying to generalize here, man. I just don't know whatever. I've been trying to give them a break. But this whole millennialism thing, whatever it came from, God, could that be from us?
Well, hang on a second. The millennials are merely a designation of a population born at a certain time. And a lot of millennials are out there, and they're conservative, and, they've got good jobs, and they're doing really well. But what we are talking about is this subset of liberal snowflakes who believe that they are perpetual victims, who believe that they are owed support by the government in exchange for doing nothing. And they figure if they just whine loud enough, they're going to get everything they want. And unfortunately, this being a politically driven government, they tend to do. He who whines the most gets the most goodies from the government. And it does have to stop because, eventually the government's going to run out of other people's money.
Well, I do agree with you there. I might shouldn't, when I said that, it sounded generalized, but I should probably include another age demographic there, because whatever it is that's happening here is unlike anything I have ever found in history, and I'm definitely a revisionist when it comes to history. At least I look further in than the regular story, his story. Well, really, Mike, I just wanted to declare also, God bless you guys, and thanks for all the work you do. You're a good brother. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. And by the way, I don't like that phrase historical revisionism because it sounds like you're trying to fake something like 1984. I prefer the term historical correctionist because we understand that a huge amount of what we think is history is a pack of lies. History is a joke.
You have been lied to about it. I agree with that, too.
All right.
On, Mike.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. But history is a joke played by the victors on the vanquished in front of an audience that's too scared to laugh. That's really what history is all about. And we know from recent events like Saddam's nuclear bombs that prudence demands we re-examine everything we have been told, including the orthodox history of World War II, the sinking of the USS Maine, the Lusitania, torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. And every time we go on back and we actually take a look behind what we were told in the state-controlled schools or on corporate media, and we find out, it was just another lie to manipulate and maneuver us into doing what the government wants us to do. Okay, let's go to another phone call. Terry in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Last weekend I flew from Denver to Los Angeles, and I don't fly that much anymore, but every time I do, seems like they had a layer of intrusion into my privacy, my private life. And I think, remember last time I had my license renewed, had to bring in my birth certificate and a proof where I lived. I don't know if you did that in your state, but they gave me a gold star in my new driver's license saying it was certified.
Yes.
And that it certified me as being there and that person. Last weekend, there was a thing on the sign of the TSA there that said we're going to need those driver's license certified to get through security. And when I went through, I gave my driver's license. Last time I flew, he looked at me and looked down and gave it to me. But this time, he hit the barcode with a beeper. And I'm wondering, can they take your data? And TSA maybe has another list, database, where they say this guy flew on this flight on this date, to keep track of you. Is that possible?
I'm sure it probably is. I mean, the government's attitude is once we have the technical capability to do anything, let's go ahead and do it. And, yeah, they do have a database on people. That's how they enforce the no-fly list, although mostly that is based on your passport. And when I renewed my passport, I got one of the ones with the built-in electronic device. There's a very thick part on the back page, and it says, do not bend or break. As far as the driver's license, Hawaii has now gone into compliance with this national ID standard. But Claire and I were able to renew our licenses before those requirements went on in because, I mean, we have the birth certificates, we have all the rest of it, but I don't have a Social Security card anymore. I mean, it was given to me on paper, and it's kind of dissolved back when Richard Nixon was in office. I mean, I've memorized my Social Security number. That's not the problem. But they're saying you have to actually present the paper Social Security card that you were given to validate your ID. Now, when I fly, and like you, I hate having to fly. I mean, I love the actual process of flying itself, but with all the TSA and everything else, you know, I really don't like to do it anymore. I'll take along my driver's license and my passport, even if it's an internal domestic flight, because between the two, you know, it's obvious who I am. But again, this is as much about creating jobs out of thin air as it is about real security, because we know that agents operating for nation states can acquire absolutely convincing perfect identification.
Yeah. Well, if you took in your original Social Security card, it says not for identification purposes, right?
Yeah, well, that was the way it originally was. There was actually a law saying that the Social Security number could not be used for any other purpose than Social Security. And then all of a sudden it's becoming the one-size-fits-all ID number for everything. And there were people who were, schools, colleges were using it as your standard file number. There was actually a time when it was being put on your driver's license as your ID number, and that, of course, led to a huge amount of identity theft that was going on. And the more they come up with these security systems, the more difficult it's making life for ordinary law-abiding citizens, and it doesn't seem to have slowed down the criminals one tiny bit at all, or the terrorists, again, witnessing what just happened in Barcelona.
Yeah, you know, when I was flying, there was a TSA guy. There was thousands of people there on a Sunday in Denver, and TSA agents, you know, pointing that way to get people to walk their way. And I'm looking at this, and I'm saying, these people just blindly do what they're told.
Yes.
I mean, we all do it. We take off our shoes, we empty our pockets, we give them our ID. So they got a clamp on what we're doing, and we comply with it. I mean, you know, I know you have to, but if you stand back and look at this operation, it's like the sheep going to slaughter or something, with just controlled by a few people.
No, it's like the Gestapo. Your papers, please, your papers, please, your papers, please. I'll tell you what I do. When I know I'm going to be flying, I'll wear the same pair of socks for like 2 weeks ahead of time. They make me take off my shoes. They're going to pay for it.
Yeah, well, one thing in my favor, if you're 75 or over, they don't let you, you don't have to take your shoes off now, but yeah. I beeped it and I had to take my shoes off anyway, you know. So anyway, I just wanted to, you know, say that it seems like every time I go through, there's another layer of intrusion and control over my personal life. You know,
there's some politician's nephew needed a job, and you know, that's what they came up with. I mean, the security-industrial complex, like the military-industrial complex and the medical-industrial complex, it's taken on a life of its own. It's kicked off, and it's big money, and it's big business, and it's not about your security. It's certainly not about your comfort. It's all about grinding more money out of the system for somebody who's at the top of the scam. I mean, Michael Chertoff, when he was head of Homeland Security, he's the guy who started all this stuff about the scanners and the cotton pads that they would wipe across your luggage and the rubber gloves and everything that was going on. Then he resigns as head of the Homeland Security and he starts a company, the Chertoff Group. And guess what they do for business? They sell airport scanners, the little swabs and the chemical tests for explosives and the rubber gloves. And Chertoff and his people are laughing all the way to the bank over what they were able to pull off on you, the American traveler.
And he's a dual citizen, you know, that dual citizen thing.
Yeah, I know. We're definitely going to yank that in the blueprint for the new America. Oh, and by the way, somebody wrote on in and said the reason they're now denouncing Teddy Roosevelt as a racist was his stated view that if you emigrate to America, you should assimilate into our culture and learn our language. And they're saying, oh, that's racism now. That's absolute racism. So that's why they want to knock his head off the Mount Rushmore, why they wanted to tear down his statue at the Museum of Natural History in New York.
Well, it seems to me like if you're a dual citizen, you can't serve two masters. So your real allegiance is probably to the other country, other than the U.S. And,
absolutely. That's the problem I have with it. We see all these dual nationals in our government, and very clearly their first allegiance is not to the American people and the American nation.
Right. Okay, Mike, I just want to make my point. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And we still have callers on the line, but we're coming up on a commercial break here. So I'm going to do a couple of real quick news stories. Back in 2015, getting on back to Charlottesville, back in 2015, there was this KKK group in South Carolina that was out there at this Confederate flag protest. I mean, that's when they started all this nonsense about tearing down the Confederacy. And so there was a KKK group that was out there, and they were angry and saying, you will not tear down this flag and monument and everything. And it turned out the head of that KKK group was an FBI undercover informant, Christopher Eugene Baker. So this is all being manufactured for public consumption, for the corporate media to present to you, oh, this is what's really going on in the world. No, it's a fiction. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And listen, I understand that there are some people who are truly offended by images of founding fathers who owned slaves, and they're bothered by the fact that our currency has many of those on there. So here, as a service by whatreallyhappened.com to the entire community, if you are truly bothered by your paper currency that has pictures of people like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln and various other slave owners on there, you just go ahead and you put them in an envelope and send them to me, and I will be happy to dispose of them for you. This is a free service we are offering, one time only, from whatreallyhappened.com and Republic Broadcasting to our community. Now, the latest from Barcelona, 13 dead, at least 100 injured in attack, 15 critical in the hospital. Boy, I have to wonder, how fast was that van going? Because I'm looking at those numbers and just thinking, there's a lot more dead and wounded than you would expect. Like that van was being rocket-propelled or something. All righty, let's go back to the phones here. Steve in Massachusetts, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I actually want to talk about that van in Barcelona.
Yes.
If you notice lately, a string of attacks by terrorism has been by car or truck or van.
Ever try and do one by skateboard?
No.
Well, there you go.
I wonder if this is a prelude to what's to come. They're going to probably say, this is my theory, they're going to say, you know what, too many terrorists attack the vans, cars, and people are reluctant to have driverless cars. A lot of them are.
Mm-hmm.
This is their way of introducing people saying, you know what, we're not going to have these attacks anymore if we have driverless cars.
Well, that may be the sales pitch for that, but first of all, anybody who wants to carry out an attack, I mean, first of all, for something like 10 years, they'll still be able to buy used older cars that are self-driving, or they'll hijack the system completely. Because we know how easy it is to get into all these computer systems, and somebody who wants to carry out an act of terror is going to find a way around whatever self-driving mechanism they have. It's going to be that easy to do. And the idea of a self-driving car, first of all, for me, driving is fun. Out of the city. I don't like driving in the city. I certainly do not like driving down here at the bottom of the hill. doing the slalom in between all the construction for the light rail, which is dragging on, and it's a pain. In that context, I think I would welcome a self-driving car. But if I'm outside the city, I'm in the country, and I'm just enjoying the road, yeah, I want to be able to drive the car myself because I actually do enjoy cross-country driving. I've done the U.S. coast to coast no less than 3 times in my youth, and I enjoyed it. I got to drive on the real original Route 66 before it was sort of decommissioned, as it were, and that was a real treat. That was a cross section of Americana. So it's a mixed thing, but yeah, everybody's going to use this event for their own particular agenda. Oh, it was ISIS. See, we've got to go back into Syria. All right, got to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call, and we'll be right back.
$860-9540. Get the I Can Get 2. That's ICANGET, the number 2, silent salesman app at appsapart.com. That's APPSAPART.com.
You're listening to Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Before we go back to the phones here, looking at this thing in Barcelona, again, they're out there saying that ISIS is claiming responsibility for the vehicle attack through its Amaq news agency. Now, we don't know if Amaq really does work for ISIS. We do know that ISIS works for the United States government covertly. And there are some interesting aspects on this. They've named one of the suspects, a gentleman named Driss Okabir, is thought to have rented the van in the ramming, but he is denying any involvement whatsoever. So they've got a suspect who's saying, I had nothing to do with this. But it is interesting to note that Spain is one of the few countries in Europe that is not directly involved in combat operations in Syria and Iraq. And so maybe this is another false flag intended to goad Spain into saying, yes, we're going to go on down and give them what for. So we'll see. But at this point, it's another false flag. It has to be. It just makes sense. All right, we're going to go back to the phones. Dave in Arizona. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How are you?
Doing okay.
Okay. I just wanted to just give people like a different view on like Charlottesville and all these events. You can't look at them as actual events. You have to look at them like you were talking about as false flags.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what they are.
Yes.
And the guy who supposedly is the white supremacist guy was an Obama supporter, and the guy who was driving the car was a Hillary supporter. You know what I'm saying?
Actually, no. The guy driving the car in Charlottesville, and the media said he was a Hillary supporter, but he's a registered registered Republican, and he was involved in all kinds of... So, yeah, it's looking more and more like either this guy simply staged the impact for news value, but again, there is video that his car came under attack further up the street, and he may have just gunned the engine trying to get the heck out of there. But he's not a Hillary supporter.
It's possible, because I did see footage where somebody was hitting the back of the car. They were hitting it with baseball bats.
Yeah.
Yeah, but some of the footage, like if you watch the
that would
footage,
motivate me to break the speed limit right then and there. But again, these are all manufactured media events. Again, somebody actually found the Craigslist ad where this Los Angeles public relations firm was hiring and recruiting these people at $25 an hour to go on down there to Charlottesville and cause a ruckus for the media cameras.
One question, I was just wondering, do you think Soros is the one paying for this, or do you think he's the front man for the government? You know what I'm saying?
He could be the front man for the government because we know now that a lot of government money is donated to his charitable non-governmental organizations. We know that Soros himself is funding both Antifa and Black Lives Matter. So, yeah, I kept wondering why Soros wasn't running out of money, but apparently he's got a direct line into your wallet here. I hear a dog in the background.
My border collie saying hi.
Oh, well, give that border collie a good belly rub from me, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Kyle in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I'm a little bit late, so I don't know if this point has been brought up, but the same media that is condemning Trump for not coming out and, castigating white nationalists as soon as everything went down in Charlottesville is the same exact media that today is saying, let's not hold judgment in Barcelona. We don't know the details of it all. We don't know who took responsibility, though you have ISIS and radical Muslims claiming responsibility. They're still out there saying, well, let's not judge all these people, not all of the people. So the hypocrisy is just never ending.
No, it isn't. And again, a prime requirement for any job in the corporate media is the ability to stand there with your hair on fire and insist convincingly that you cannot smell any smoke.
Well, these people are not newsmen. They're legitimately, they should be nominated for Emmys because they're actors. They're fake tears. They're faux outrage. They're, like I keep saying, the fainting Victorians. They're panting out on their couch. They're, I can't believe that Trump would do this. And it's all BS. And anybody who's buying into it, I legitimately feel sorry for you because there's something that's not working right. If you can't see through this, then the problem's not with the rest of us. The problem is with you.
Well, like I said, I saw the transition happening when I was in college, and I was an astronomy major, but I was required to take other courses outside my major, and so I took a journalism course. And it was teaching about journalism, who, what, where, when, why, sometimes how, and it was about going on out and doing interviews and getting the facts and writing up a story. And then years later, more recently, when I was teaching computer animation out at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, the classroom next to mine was their beginning journalism course, and it was all about how to do your hair and makeup and read teleprompters. That's how dramatically it had changed in those years.
So, on a different subject completely, how are you situated for the eclipse on Monday? What's it going to be like there out in Hawaii?
Well, we won't see the totality. We'll see about a little less than half the disk covered, and I have my safety filters, and if we're not clouded out, I'm going to get out there with the camera and take a picture for the website. But it's going to be a partial solar eclipse. But obviously for the main United States, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I've never seen a total eclipse in person. I really would love to do that. And if you're anywhere near the area, seize the opportunity. Take your kids to see something that they may never get to see again in their life. And make sure you have actual safety glasses. A lot of fakes out there. Amazon is now issuing refunds for the bogus solar filter glasses that were sold through their website, and you don't even need to return the glasses. Just throw them away and destroy them. But you do need to make sure that you have either a welding glass filter, which is going to be perfectly appropriate, or something that is designed for solar observation that blocks not just the visible light, but also the ultraviolet, because the filters that don't block the UV, those are the ones that'll really harm your eye, and you won't realize there's a problem until it's too late. So be very careful.
There is actually,
I would go with a small. Hang on. I would go with a small telescope and a right-angle eyepiece and a solar projection, or even just a pinhole camera. cardboard box, piece of tinfoil at the top with a pinhole in it, piece of white paper on the bottom, and just let it project onto the paper. That is the safest way to do observation of the eclipse until it's total. And then once it's total, obviously you can look at it with the naked eye without any problem.
The iPhone has a fantastic app that utilizes the camera, and you'll be able to your phone in front of the sun, and it will filter out obviously any of the harmful rays, but also
you can damage the charge couple device with that. I would be very, very careful about that. And I know the latest generation of CCDs are very resilient compared to the original ones, but I certainly would not want to point a CCD camera on my phone or my tablet directly at the sun for any prolonged amount of time. I think that would be a very reckless and dangerous thing to do. For the device, not for you.
Okay. Have a good one, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And, again, there's another reason not to use your phone camera or your tablet camera, and that is they are not telescopic. You are just going to see a little tiny dot up there, unless you get one of those clip-on telephotos. And in that case, if you get a clip-on telephoto and you put a piece of welder's glass in front of it, then you've got a system that's really going to work. Safe to view the sun on your iPhone screen, safe to take pictures. Really, if you're going to do this, do your homework, because we're talking about your eyes primarily and your very expensive electronics secondarily. All right, Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Listen, I have a quick comment. Remember the scene in The Godfather where Michael Corleone tells the lawyer Hayden, his half-brother, that keep your friends close but your enemies closer?
Yes.
I have a feeling Trump is using the same tactics against the former employees of Obama. What do you think?
I don't think so. I don't think Trump is that sophisticated, and in any event, if that's his strategy, it is not working because he's outnumbered. Okay?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing okay.
Mike, I see that now the so-called Economic Council is withdrawing from Trump. A lot of these corporate thugs there because they don't like his stand on Virginia and Charlottesville. So this is my suggestion to Trump. What I would do is I would take all these companies, all these corporations, including definitely these Silicon Valley types, who are trying. I do that with them anyway because what they're doing, trying to suppress free speech on there. I would start huge amounts of antitrust actions against all these big companies. I'd start breaking them up. I say, you guys want to play games with me? We'll play games. I'd have done that anyway if I was president. But now this is the time you really should do it. And he needs to clean out his cabinet. He needs to clean out the neocons. He needs to get rid of that bum, McMaster. I refuse to call him general. I would get rid of... I'd get rid of Kushner. If I said, well, his family and all that, all right, I'll give him a job somewhere in the basement of the White House, filing papers or something like that. But that's about it. This is what he's got to do, and he's got to bring in. He doesn't have to get rid of Steve Bannon. He's got to bring in more true nationalist populists like Steve Bannon. And I'm wondering what's going to happen with Bannon because I see that he wrote some article or something at the Times or something like that. I don't know. I wonder if maybe Trump told him he should do something like that to maybe get somebody like McMaster to leave voluntarily, or if he did it in his own, saying, to heck with it, let him kick me out. I'll be more effective outside. I don't know. I don't know what you might think.
Well, even the corporate media was saying effectively that Bannon was sort of on an internal exile. He was being sort of ignored by everybody, and there's another rumor that he is actually going to step down tomorrow. So, again, in dealing with all of this, tend to go with Occam's razor until something else shows up that says it really is a little more complicated. Don't add complication to any of these theories just for the sake of complication. A lot of people love getting caught up in the fine details and all these little things that could be going on. Simpler is better, simple and elegant, because if you come up with these extraordinarily convoluted conspiracy theories, you're giving these people credit for far more intelligence and knowledge than they really have. I think back to the Watergate scandal. And Deep Throat's comment to the Washington Post reporters in that garage, he was saying, you know, everybody's running around thinking these people are the best and the brightest, but the truth is they're really not very bright at all. They're very stupid. They're just willing to do the dirty work for the president, and that's why they're in the White House, but they're not really smart. And if you go back and you look at what they actually did, most of it was pretty lame. And it was almost like it was only a matter of time before somebody did something that was so obviously horrendously bad that they were going to get caught, like the break-in at the Watergate Hotel and taping the door lock open even after it was clear the security guards had been alerted to the fact that they were doing that. So, and again, you look at what's going on today, you look at the White House, you look at the Congress, forget that it's the White House and the Congress, and just evaluate their actions as you would a friend, neighbor, or coworker, and you realize there's a lot of stupidity up there in Washington, D.C. Maybe they've got lead pipes up there, maybe they're all on prescription antidepressants, but the quality of thinking overall coming out of Washington, D.C. does not impress me.
But the thing is, one of the reasons I say what I said is what Trump's last press conference and about keeping the monuments and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Bannon was a talk show host for Breitbart, and he was a big military historian, for one thing.
Yeah.
And he's an especially big fan. He's being from Virginia. He's a big fan of the, what was Lee's army called? The Army of the Potomac, I think, or the Army of Virginia.
It was the Army of Virginia. It was the Union was the Army of the Potomac.
That's right. And he said that, you know, that was the best army ever assembled together. So I think he might have gotten, I think some of what's going on is him influencing Trump. So I hope maybe it goes the other way and that the neocons and the globalists and all these other bums that he has in the White House, they leave, and Bannon and people like him stay. You know, like I said, we'll find out, I guess, in the next few days. Because that is very strange, because that was, he used to always talk about that on his show about the Army of, about Lee's Virginia Army and what a great general Lee was.
He was a great general. He graduated West Point. In fact, when the Civil War broke out, he was offered command of the Union Army, and he turned it down because he was more loyal to the state of Virginia than to the federal government.
Personally, I disagree with him about the best soldiers this country's ever had, best army. I think the best army this country ever had were was Crazy Horse, Red Cloud, and Geronimo. Those are some of the best. They were, with what they had to fight with the little bit.
Let's not forget Sitting Bull. Let's not forget Sitting Bull.
Yeah. We talk about Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull, and him were, you know, pretty much like general and assistant general. So yeah, you're right. Sitting Bull, Chief Joseph also is excellent.
Yep.
These are real skilled warriors and soldiers.
Yeah, well, you know, on the other hand, Wovoka was a nut job. Let's be honest.
Who?
Wovoka, head of the Ghost Dancers, the guy who painted up the shirts and said these will magically stop the soldiers' bullets, didn't really work out all that well.
No, definitely not. There's a good book about that too, but the Ghost Dancer. I don't know if you ever read it, Ghost Dancer.
I haven't read the book. I've read a lot about them, and in my various travels through the American West, I've seen surviving Ghost Dancer shirts. So it was a fanatical cult, like anything else. Anyway, listen, got to let you go here. We're getting close to a commercial. A lot of callers waiting on the line here, and I think the next caller is Fred in Pennsylvania. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, this is Fred in Pennsylvania. I'll get to the point. August 10th, I don't have it in front of me, but I just had it set to go. Workers' World Weekly had on the front page a notice for everyone to show up at Charlottesville and it had the kind of placards in the photo that you should carry, smash white supremacy. A little bit later, I saw the same placards publicized, and then in the communist rallies, the leftist rallies later in Pennsylvania, exact same placard. So the fact is, this notice, like an eighth of a page, indicated that there was going to be a confrontation designed to destroy a permitted meeting. And another thing, Michael, that just the fact that you stop a permitted meeting means that it can't be reported as a unite the right. In other words, the left is denying, or the far left is denying, conservatives and constitutionalists a publicity tool. And this is important. If they didn't have this publicity battle, then there wouldn't be nearly the incentive to destroy and disrupt.
Oh yeah, it's definitely to play for the corporate media to attract their attention, to guarantee coverage. Peaceful protests don't get a lot of camera time. Inside the corporate news, there's sort of a running joke: if it bleeds, it leads; if it thinks, it stinks. Right. And that's why they're going to. And
also, Michael, there was the word Antifa was. I didn't see it I didn't hear it on WHYY, which was a public radio, and there was not in Southeast Pennsylvania. Nothing. The word Antifa was just, there were folks there, sort of who.
They wanted to keep the focus on the white separates. Got to let you go. Got to let you go. Got to take a commercial break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take two more phone calls, and we're going to try and get back and get some real news on out there. So, Robert in New Jersey. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Doing a good job. Just wanted to mention they have the second attack in Barcelona, which is part of Catalan.
Yes.
This is an interesting way for the Spaniards to send a message to the people of Catalan province that want to secede from Spain. That's just the thought I had. That's it.
I think it would go. I think it would go the other way. I mean, basically, Catalan is going to be saying, "See what happens if we remain connected to Spain," because Spain may not.
I'm sure that's what.
Yeah, Spain may not be actually involved militarily with the coalition in Syria and Iraq, but they are contributing financial and material support.
Right, but I think the Brussels people who don't want Brexit or any other Frexit don't want a single province to remove themselves from a country.
Yeah, but
I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, no, I
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying Spain itself is involved, but I wouldn't be surprised that it's trying to send a message that if you want to remove yourself from this, you're going to face this. Because I would have taken Madrid.
I understand what you're saying, and there is merit to it, but I think the people of Catalan are going to go the other way, and they're going to say that as long as we remain part of the European Union, and the European Union is on board with the United States wars in all these places around the world, we're going to be a target, and the best way for us to be safe is we need to break off now.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised if that's true too, that they will go that way. But what I'm saying is, could it be you're trying to send a message to them? If it backfires, it backfires.
I think it's backfiring. If that's what's going on, I think it backfired.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open, but I need to get some news here because, well, that's what I do over here. And again, getting on back to this whole Charlottesville nonsense in there, out there screaming about the KKK, and except for, of course, Hillary Clinton's friend Byrd. Nobody's talking about doing anything about him. But here is the actual reality. Right now in the United States of America, there are more people claiming they have been abducted by space aliens and experimented on than admit membership in the KKK. It is a thin shadow of its former self, and probably most of them are undercover FBI informants in order to keep the KKK out there and say, see, there's the KKK, booga, booga, booga. You need to understand that organizations like, for example, Southern Poverty Law Center and the ADL, and they would collapse if the enemy went away. And there was, back in the 1930s, a huge scandal where the American Nazi Party was out there with their membership of 6, and they got a lot of press coverage. And the ADL was out there fundraising, saying, you've got to donate to us because we're standing between, the Nazi Party and the Jewish people. And then the head of the American Nazi Party got arrested for embezzling from his employer, who turned out to be the ADL. See how it works? This is why all these charities are out there saying we're searching for a cure for whatever. They never actually find one. Because they all remember what happened when tuberculosis was cured. All the charities collapsed. They don't want that to happen. They're going to be searching for a cure. What they're actually searching for are more treatments here. Now, getting on back to Charlottesville and the KKK and Antifa and Black Lives Matter, apparently there is actually a ad hoc group in Washington, D.C., in the Capitol building, the Republicans for Antifa Club, and 3 of its most prominent members are John McCain, Mitt Romney, and Marco Rubio. They think Antifa are heroes, and they're wonderful. Now, somebody got Condoleezza Rice on for an interview, and, of course, they're talking to her about being an African-American woman and how she feels about all this. And what she had to say was right to the point, and I'll explain it to you when we come back from these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about aftermath of Charlotte, and everybody's trying to milk that for their own political agenda. And Condoleezza Rice was being interviewed on Fox and Friends, and basically said that as an African-American woman, did Condi see herself in the Constitution? And looking back at how 9 of the first 12 presidents were slave owners, should we start taking their statues down and say, we're embarrassed by you? And Rice came right on back and said, no. I'm a firm believer in keep your history before you. So I don't actually want to rename things that were named for slave owners. I want us to have to look at those names and realize what they did and be able to tell our kids what they did and for them to have a sense of their own history. It's probably the only thing Condoleezza Rice has ever said that I 100% agree with. And then she added, when you start wiping out your history, sanitizing your history to make you feel better, that is a bad thing. And it's even worse when your history is being wiped out and sanitized to make somebody else feel better. Trump is out there saying the removal of these Confederate monuments is just so foolish, and he's absolutely right. Now, over in Seattle, Mayor Murray is saying, oh, we have a Confederate monument in the cemetery here. They're all jumping on board this thing here. Apparently, a Chicago pastor has asked Rahm Emanuel's administration to remove the names of 2 presidents who owned slaves from parks on the South Side, saying the city should not honor slave owners in black communities. Give it a rest. As I said earlier in the show, no white person alive in the United States today has ever owned a slave. No black person alive in the United States today has ever had to pick cotton. Sometimes it seems like the black population are as hopelessly trapped living in the past as the Israelis. They don't want to let go. Apparently, black pastors are demanding the Smithsonian remove the statue of Planned Parenthood founder Margaret Sanger because of her anti-black sentiments. I mean, where is this going to end? Anybody who's ever done anything important in history has made enemies or alienated some group or the other. If we start erasing the history because somebody somewhere is offended about it, you're going to be able to fit the entire history of the world into a pamphlet, which I'm sure students in history classes in school are going to be happy about. They only have to memorize a couple of things. Now, a little bit of good news out of Gettysburg. The officials are out there saying it's firm. The Confederate monuments will remain. Apparently, there's a big screaming hysteria going on to remove a statue of Robert E. Lee that's at Gettysburg. And the officials are saying, no, it's staying. And by the way, that's the popular view. Polls are showing only 27% of Americans agree with this idea of tearing down the Confederate statues. 62% of Americans believe they should be left right where they are. We shouldn't cater to minority whiners. And to show how overboard it's getting, this is really funny. This weekend in San Francisco, Joey Gibson is leading what's called a Patriot Prayer Rally. And Nancy Pelosi, responding to the word patriot, came on out screaming that it's a white supremacist rally. We've got to shut it down. We've got to shut it down. It's white supremacist. Turns out all the speakers at the event are non-white, except for one. They're all minority people. There's one white speaker. And yet Pelosi's out there saying it's a white supremacist rally. By the way, I had a good friend of mine I had a phone call from. And he's saying that he's running into a lot of black people who still support Donald Trump. And these are obviously not white supremacists. And yet that is the image of the Trump supporter the corporate media and the Democrats are trying to sell you here. All right, let's take some phone calls. Brendan in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I just wanted to piggyback on the rally in San Francisco. It's actually at Christie Fields, which was a former military base right below the Golden Gate Bridge. And it's actually the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, which is federal land.
Yes.
And you're allowed to conceal carry. There was a 2010 law permitting concealed carry on.
Okay, I think we just lost you. Okay, well, let me follow up on that one comment. I know what you're talking about. When I was working on the day after tomorrow, the effects shop was actually in the Presidio, and every time I got a lunch break, I would go explore because I loved the history of the place, and they were actually excavating a couple of archaeological sites there. And I'd go over to that fort. I don't care if the law says you can conceal carry, don't do it. Because you're going to walk into a trap and you're going to be used as an example of why the white supremacists should be disarmed. And there's already talk out there saying that, yes, whites should be banned from owning guns because of all the black people they're killing. Now, the statistics are actually that more blacks are killing whites than whites are killing blacks. Just like the thing about white police officers are targeting the black population. Actually, no. The statistics are police officers are killing 3 times as many white people as black people because they're afraid of the negative publicity if they kill a black person. But there's never any negative publicity when they kill a white person, so go ahead, empty the clip. Let's see what's going to go on. Brendan, did you ever come back? All right.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, well, yeah, we lost you for a second here, so kind of pick up where you left off.
Well, so one white speaker, I understand, is probably a transgender person, which, doesn't fit their narrative. And they're using all the trigger words, white supremacists, white nationalists. Why can't we just be called Trump supporters, which is probably more accurate than anything else?
Well, it would be more accurate to say you're all conservatives as well. But again, this is not news reporting. This is a smear job. They are, between now and the elections next year, trying to make anybody who supports Donald Trump or the GOP in general look like a very, very bad thing. What they're trying to do is undo and reverse the damage they inflicted on themselves with all the rioting and the whining and the crying after Hillary lost the election. And they're coming to understand that the public image of the Democratic Party is really not very good. So the new idea is they're going to destroy the public image of the GOP and the Trump supporters with all this white supremacist nonsense. And again, it remains to be seen if they'll get any traction with it, or if the American people are just going to realize this is more mudslinging by the Democrats in place of actually having some kind of a platform to run on.
Mike, did I cut out before I mentioned that you can concealed carry in these national park areas?
You cut out right when you were in the middle of that, and my response to that is I understand that you can do it. I would advise against it because obviously this Patriot rally is going to be subject to infiltration by people who are going to try and kick up any violence. Everybody's got to keep a cool head.
Yeah, agent provocateurs will definitely be there. The feds are probably leading all these white groups anyway. I'm mentioning that purely as they're trying to include, anti-gun rhetoric along with the anti-Trumps. But on that note, I'll let you go, Mike. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Tom in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just wanted to ask if you would speak a little bit about the global currency reset that's being talked about and regarding asset-backed currency. How you feel about that?
Well, I think all currency should be asset-backed. This idea of running a nation or the entire world on a perpetual pyramid of debt is nonsense. You don't need a careful analysis to see that every single nation that's had this debt-based central bank system has been very good for the central bank owners and very bad for the people. That is why when the American colonies were set up, they just started creating their own money. And there was enough money to make sure that there was full employment and a functioning economy. And when the bankers in Great Britain found out about it, they lobbied King George III to pass the Currency Act, which mandated that the American colonies had to conduct all commerce using banknotes borrowed at interest from the Bank of England. And in only a few years, the American colonies sank into extreme poverty. And that was a primary motivating force of the American Revolution. You will never hear that in school because we're back under that same predatory banking system. It's called the Federal Reserve.
Well, there is a lot of talk about this actually coming down, and I'm wondering what you feel about. Is this actually going to come down where we will have a one world currency and all asset backed, everybody be on parity? And if you do think that, I know you said it should happen, but do you think it will happen, I guess?
Well, no, I never said that we should have a single global currency. And the people who are pushing for a single global currency merely want a larger version of the private central bank that creates this currency out of thin air and loans it to everybody at interest. And
no, I don't mean that. I mean there would be everybody would have their own currency, but they'd all be at parity to gold or to some assets.
Well, definitely that's what should happen. But you need an asset of recognized universal value that exists in plentiful enough supply that it cannot be hoarded and manipulated, like we saw the Bunker brothers do with silver back in the 1990s. And so while I think gold and silver are great stores of wealth right now, I think we need a different commodity base, and one that suggests itself is electric power. We take the kilowatt hour and we monetize it as a unit of currency. And the advantage there is that it's certainly going to spur the efficient development of power generation and storage. Second, as the population grows and more power stations come into existence, the commodity base will grow with the population, so it cannot be hoarded, manipulated, or exploited. And I call it the electro. I wrote an article about it some years back. But I think that would definitely be a way to go. But asset-backed currencies are definitely much more stable than fiat currencies. The only proviso is that commodity base has to be existing in plentiful enough supply where it will not fall victim to the manipulations of the speculators.
And the bankers, they don't want that to happen.
No, of course not.
So what would you say? What do you think is their level of ability to resist?
Well, as long as we have governments that are willing to sell the people out into slavery in exchange for campaign donations, the bankers are going to continue to control the world. But when we're talking about a grand currency reset, it's not really a reset. Reset implies a voluntary decision to reset the system. What we're looking at is a global crash of all these interlinked private central banks, and at that point, the people need to stand on up and simply say, we're not going to go through this again. And any politicians who are out there suggesting we need a new private central bank that creates money out of thin air and loans it into circulation, we give them a good thick coat of tar and feathers and we run them out of town on a rail, preferably redwood because it leaves really deep splinters.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call.
Thank you.
Now, this white supremacist nonsense is already spreading outside the United States of America. Apparently, over in Great Britain, there is this graffiti that's being spotted in many places saying, no whites allowed after 8 p.m. Jim Crow in reverse. And again, you do not end racism by being racist in reverse. Two wrongs do not make a right. Now, getting on back to Donald Trump, as you know, a lot of the discussion about what's going on takes place on Twitter. And there is a hashtag trending called Impeach Trump. And it's been exposed that the Democratic National Committee is using bots to artificially push this trend upward. They're cheating. Again, imagine my shock. Another very alarming story, and this came out of Scientific American. Democrats in Congress are exploring the idea of creating an expert panel on Trump's mental health. They're going to go for the 25th Amendment. Now, there is a problem with that. There is no machine that you can hook up to somebody's brain that will say this person is normal, this person is psychotic, this person is sociopathic, this person is narcissistic. It's always a subjective judgment by a human practitioner who is just as subject to their own biases, prejudices, outside influence as anybody else. One of the big problems with the current psychiatric industry, if you will, is that everybody is sharing in the profits of prescription psychiatric medication. And so psychologists and psychiatrists, that's what they're going to do. They're going to prescribe medications. And as a result, we're one of the most drugged up societies on the face of the earth. And it's having devastating side effects, such as mass shootings, suicides, domestic violence, road rage, so forth and so on. Believe it or not, Representative Steve Cohen, Democrat of Tennessee, has actually introduced articles of impeachment against Donald Trump based on his comments about Charlottesville, Virginia. And Cohen is the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Subcommittee on the Constitution and Civil Justice. This guy has to know that you cannot impeach a president for not agreeing with what he's saying. There has to be an actual high crime or misdemeanor, like obstruction of justice. He's doing this purely for show, so the media can say, oh my goodness, Donald Trump is being impeached. Horror of horrors. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Chris in Michigan, I'm probably going to have to take you to the commercial break. What's on your mind?
That's fine, Mike. I'll just make it quick if you don't have to. Could you, aloha.
Aloha.
Could you remind the audience once again how all of the people who are on the opposing side of taking the statues down, who don't want to take them down, can just say, okay, well, you took down all the statues of slavery, but the fact still remains that the Democratic Party began with slavery. They voted against it after slavery, and they were the ones keeping slaves. They were the ones fighting for the South.
That's the big ugly secret of the Democratic Party. They were pro-slavery. They gave birth to the KKK, and yes, they fought against emancipation and equal rights all along. And now they're trying to reverse that and say, oh, it's those Republicans, those white people, they're all to blame. All right, well, Chris, thank you very much. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Getting on back to the news here. Apparently, the Secret Service is now investigating a Missouri state senator, Maria Chappelle Nadel, and apparently she did a Facebook post where she said, I hope Trump is assassinated. And this, of course, provoked a furious flashback, and eventually she took the Facebook post down, but
it did attract the attention of the Secret Service, who are going to have a little bit of a talk with her. And I want to make a point here. I'm obviously opposed to censorship. I'm a strong supporter of the First Amendment, and the First Amendment says you can say whatever you want. However, decency and common sense require that one carefully consider their words and ideas before opening their mouths or hitting that keyboard. Right now, we have too many people in America who think the First Amendment is a license to simply be outrageous. And in many contexts, yes, that's true. But you're talking about the president here, and it is against the law to threaten him. And again, it's not an appropriate way to deal with our differences of opinion. I'll be the first one to admit I'm terribly disappointed in Donald Trump. But I would not wish him harm. I would love to get a chance to talk to him and say, I disagree with you on these particular areas, and this is why. Because that is how you properly run a republic. Debate, hypothesis, synthesis, antithesis, all working together to come up with a path forward. But right now we're descending into a mobocracy. The entire country is going insane. They think the nation's problems can be solved with a baseball bat. And that has never, ever worked anywhere in history. Now, speaking of Donald Trump, apparently he's offered the job of White House Communications Director to Hope Hicks. And apparently she has accepted. So very high turnover there at the White House. All right, let's take a phone call. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You know, Mike, I want to talk about monuments, but first I want to make a comment about white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
What about all that white supremacy going on in Palestine? Any comments about that out there?
Not in the corporate media. You're never going to hear it in the corporate media about all the white supremacy happening over there. You know, because that's...
A monument.
Yes, monument.
Yeah, the monuments. You know, it seems to me that the people that made all the money off the slave trade, we know who did that, who owned the ships and who owned the brokerage houses. It seems to me that they're trying to cover their tracks. I don't think they give a damn about the blacks and slavery. I think once they get rid of all the monuments, then when somebody talks about slavery, they'll say, "What slavery? Show me where there's slavery. Where's your proof that there was slaves?"
Well, you know, maybe they're just maybe they're just tired of the competition. You know, as a victim class. I mean, we know how Israel was fighting the official recognition of the Armenian genocide. They don't want to share the victimhood limelight with anybody else. And slavery is in the United States, slavery is a big deal. Maybe Israel wants slavery to simply fade away so they can just go on talking about the Holocaust day after day after day after day for a small fee. Okay?
Yep. Good point.
All right, we got to let you go. Got to do a station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now then, apparently, Representative Dana Rohrabacher, California Republican, went to the Ecuadorian embassy in London and met with Julian Assange, who is out there, like Kim.com, saying he has actual proof that the DNC emails that were released near the election last year were an internal leak and were not hacked by Russia. And apparently whatever Assange had was compelling, because now we're hearing that there may in fact be a presidential pardon for Julian Assange. And all I can say to Julian is you stay at a small aircraft in suburban Washington, D.C. parks. Because if Assange really does have the goods, if Assange was part of the pipeline, and obviously he was, the leaks came out through WikiLeaks. Assange knows where it came from. So does Kim.com. There was a conduit where Seth Rich was handing off these flash drives to somebody who handed them off to somebody else and got them to WikiLeaks. And if Assange is allowed to testify to this, and it'll probably have to be on the independent media, the corporate media won't go near it because they have bet their credibility, what little of it remains, on pushing this idea that Russia hacked the DNC email servers. They will not back off on that. And that Seth Rich was just a botched robbery where, yes, he was killed and it was horrible, and yeah, the robbers were so stupid they left his wallet and his watch and his cell phone. And Assange can destroy that narrative. So can Kim.com. Kim.com's been trying to work through Special Counsel Mueller's group, and he's being ignored. But sooner or later, there's going to be a breakthrough on this case here. Apparently, CNN has now declined to the point where anybody who doesn't agree with them is by default a fascist. Oh, you don't agree with our interpretation of the news? You must be a fascist. Oh, you're a fascist. We have to send you. Oh, you're a fascist. It's amazing. All right, let's talk about the war zones. We're a little late getting here. We had a lot of phone calls, but they were good phone calls here. So apparently there is now a report that Iran is going to build a long-range missile factory in Syria. And I'm not sure where this is coming from. It almost feels like a pushback to the revelation that American and British chemical weapons continue to be found inside Syria. And we know that Iran is next on the special high-interest targets list for the United States. So we have to be very, very careful about that claim, where they're trying to tangle up Iran and Syria and, oh, they're building long-range missiles. Well, if you were being invaded, wouldn't you build weapons to defend yourself or deter invasion? Meanwhile, the government forces captured more points north of the Sunbul gas station in the Ain Tarma area in eastern Damascus. So they're starting to take away the revenue stream for ISIS. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Dan in Illinois, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay, yeah. How you doing? I was just going through some YouTube stuff on my TV, and there's YouTube from Hot News, and they had John McCain standing with a neo-Nazi that helped overthrow the government in the Ukraine.
Yes.
I guess he went to a party with them and stuff like that.
Well,
hypocrite.
Of course it's a total hypocrisy. I mean, the U.S. has actually supported a lot of neo-Nazi governments as long as they're willing to work with the U.S. The U.S. government doesn't really have an ideological position that they're starting from. It's total expedience and pragmatism. They'll work with anybody. They're working with some of the worst human rights abusers in the Middle East. But as long as they continue to serve the United States corporate interests, yeah, everything's going to be just fine. You know, neo-Nazis are only a bad thing when they're using the label to smear conservative Trump supporters.
Yeah. Well, look at what's going on in the Middle East. Look what they just did. They gave Hezbollah years and years of hands-on battle experience.
Yes.
If that's not a recruitment poster, I don't know what is. They're coming out as heroes, helping Syria. And what else do you need when you're army? You need recruits and hands-on battle experience. These guys got it all now.
Yeah, they've been building up. And again, the U.S. government makes these decisions to solve an immediate need, and they really don't think the long term, and the stuff continues to backfire on them. We've got photos of John McCain with the leaders of ISIS.
Yeah, I seen the videos.
Yeah,
and it's getting ridiculous. Nobody knows. Nobody says nothing about it.
Yes, well, we have. We certainly have. We've been talking about it. No, he's no hero. He did, in fact, cooperate with the North Vietnamese forces. He made propaganda radio broadcasts for them. He was responsible for this epic disaster on the USS Forrestal, and he only got away with it because his daddy was an admiral.
Yeah. Well, look how many airmen he probably killed by giving up the jamming codes and things like that I heard he did.
Well, I mean, look at how many he killed just on the decks of that aircraft carrier. I mean, technically, he qualifies as an enemy ace.
Yeah. All because he was hot-shotting it on the deck.
Yeah.
And it's just, I know, everybody's frustrated about this garbage, you know? And
yeah, we are frustrated because we're seeing people like John McCain and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and all the rest, and we see these people for what they really are, and we're wondering just how did they hijack our nation away from us, and how do we get it back without a lot of blood involved?
Yeah. Oh, and one more thing.
Yes.
I seen a Bob Hope movie one time where he's in a Western, and he's in a bar. A bunch of KKK come walking in, hoods and everything, and he turns to who he's with and says, "Oh, look, the Democrats are here."
Yeah, I remember that one. I remember that one. Yes. Yeah, I remember. I need a little help here. Last year, during the campaign, somebody actually did a movie about the secret history of the Democratic Party that showed their roots in slavery and everything. And I'm trying to remember the name of that film. I don't remember if it was actually in the theaters or where it was. I know it was like close to feature length and very good production values. I want to find that one again and get that up on the on what really happened, as long as I'm not violating somebody's copyright.
Yeah, and there's one that it's on a website, PragerU.com, and it has a female, lady, black professor, and she explains how the Democrats screwed everything up through history, as far as, the KKK and all that. I mean, she does it. She's well-spoken, and she just lays it out. Self-explanatory. I mean, she did an excellent job at it, and it's a black professor.
Yep.
So I'll let you go. I know you got other people.
All right. Well, actually, at the moment, no. The phone lines are open, but thank you very much for the phone call, and this is my chance to catch up on the news here. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network. Now, Russia's Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, is out there saying at this point it is inescapable. The West has been supplying chemical weapons to the Syrian rebels. Even at the same time, they keep insisting to you that Assad was gassing his own people. What a horrible thing to do. And the story never made any sense, especially the last one that prompted Donald Trump's cruise missile attack. And we understand that the head of the CIA, Mike Pompeo, lied to Donald Trump and said they absolutely had incontrovertible evidence that Assad had done this. And I wish Donald Trump had sat back and said, it doesn't make any sense, because he's winning the war against the rebels. The world is coming to politically accept that he's going to remain the leader of Syria. The absolute last thing in the world he's going to do is carry off some atrocity that would justify the U.S. going back on in. It never made any sense. And Trump just went along with it. Either he was arm-twisted or threatened or blackmailed, or who knows. I mean, we're definitely not getting the Donald Trump we voted for on many, many important issues. And we should be all... Is it too late to get a refund on any of this stuff? All right, we're going to take a phone call. Alex in San Antonio. Aloha, Alex. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. First, I just wanted to say the movie you're thinking about is Hillary's America by Dinesh D'Souza.
I think you're right.
The reason I was calling was because we had touched upon the other day that the continuation of government plans by FEMA and all that. If you pay attention to the scope of all the things that they're trying to have be an obstacle in I guess conciliatory rhetoric, because every single time that you go back into trying to say, okay, we should be unified, we need to look at this like this and like this and like this, there's a group that is hell-bent on trying to cause division and over the silliest things. And what I'm wondering is do you think that this is perhaps just desperation on top of desperation because they have no clue on how to get us to fight each other? And the second point I wanted to make, just real quick, was I don't think that they're gonna get anybody to fight. I don't think that people have the morale to do it. I mean, these people can't even hold a conversation, let alone an argument. So if they get belligerent, I mean, I'm not trying to say that the Patriots have it up on them, but I think the best thing that we need to do is learn how to maintain our cool, because these people they're not thinking with their brains at all.
No, they're not. And as I mentioned earlier, going into the election, Claire and I have a very dear friend here in Oahu. We've known her since we moved here. That's a long time ago. And she's a liberal. She was a Hillary supporter. And it was kind of weird over the last year to see her brain start to fossilize, because she's an intelligent person. But she sort of got into this idea of, well, if there's something I don't know about the candidates, it's not important that I know. And so she clung to the revealed image of Hillary Clinton and all the stuff that she thought she knew about Donald Trump, and wouldn't even entertain the possibility that a lot of it was lying, and in a way became almost arrogant in her ignorance. And that is becoming a very common factor that we're seeing in the liberals, and it's the hallmark of people who are on the verge of becoming religious fanatics. And Hillary Clinton did, in fact, run her campaign as a personality cult. Think of Jim Jones, with baggy female clothes on, and you'll get the idea of what was going on.
No, I totally agree, Mike, because I have friends that are on the same type of thing, where they're real smart, they're very intelligent, very capable. They conduct their lives very well, but when it comes to certain topics, it's like that's conspiracy, and they don't entertain that, and then yet they want to claim that they have a good beat on reality, and they're just not admitting reality to themselves. I mean, at what point do you call BS on the Iran bomb thing? It's been 30 years, and they've been months away from it. I mean, at what point do you, seriously, since I was 5, I can remember these guys saying the same thing, and I'm 37 now. It's been 32 years. At what point do you seriously just take a look at yourself and say, okay, these values that I now had, that I learned, they need to evolve with the new paradigm that exists, technology, information being readily available to everybody real time. I think that's the hardest thing people are finding a tough time adjusting to.
Well, what's going on here is they are slaves to their belief systems. And the way it works is when you're a little tiny child, before you understand that the big people are really full of it, you will be dragged off into kindergarten and Sunday school, and they will begin indoctrinating you with the core beliefs that will be their means of controlling you for the rest of your life. And as you grow older, your personality and your identity form around those core beliefs. And so what happens when you are talking to somebody and you are saying something that challenges the core beliefs, their mind responds as if it's a personal attack. And their response will be defensive. And they will get...
Well, that's what I'm saying, though, Mike.
Yeah, but
they get very primitive.
They do. But it is possible, through an act of will, to just let those beliefs go. And it can be a very traumatizing experience. In a way, you can feel like your own identity has lost a big part of it, and you have to sort of rediscover who you are.
You're 100% correct, Mike. When I awoke beyond the paradigm, I was physically ill for like 3 weeks, like physically unable to do anything, because I felt like everything I did, I was just a pawn for something else. So yeah. It definitely takes a life-changing event, something to make your emotions have the courage to look beyond and rise above that.
Yeah,
but,
you do.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate everything you do, and keep doing your thing.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and my reaction was a little different. I mean, when I finally started freeing myself from the chains of belief, my reaction was actually a little more pleasant. I almost felt like I was having a drug experience, and I wasn't. But all of a sudden, everything just looked clearer, sharper, the colors were more brilliant, I could hear more sounds. It was like my beliefs were literally blocking off my senses from seeing things that my beliefs would not let me see. And so I went through that experience, and it's disorienting, but in my case, it was a little bit more pleasant. When it happens to you, you will know it. There'll be no mistaking. You have declared your independence from the chains of beliefs, because that's why you're given those beliefs. Those are the handles that are used to steer you where those in power want you to go. Okay, let's see. Now, I did look at Hillary's America. There's a trailer. Apparently, it is a commercial movie. You can buy the DVD, and because of that, I can't post it to whatreallyhappened.com. I will put the trailer up. But, yeah, the whole point of it is it's the Democrats who were working to keep the blacks as slaves. They gave rise to the KKK and opposed emancipation, opposed equal rights. They were fighting it tooth and nail all along. And now here we are where the media and the Democrats are out there saying, no, it's those white people over in the GOP. They're the slave owners and slave masters. And again, no white people alive in the United States today have ever owned a slave. And no black person alive today in the United States has ever had to pick cotton. We're going to take another phone call here. Fred in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Fred, are you there? Fred, I guess we lost Fred. All right, we're going to go back to the news here then. Apparently, more and more people are saying that Syria does now have a legal right and a case to apply to the United Nations because of the U.S.-made chemical weapons that continue to be found in Syria. And to basically use those weapons and the evidence of those weapons to officially call into question any prior conclusions that Assad and Syria were behind these chemical weapons attacks taking place in Syria. Because remember, before this whole thing really cranked on up, when the U.S. was saying we have to invade Syria to get rid of Assad's chemical weapons, Putin steps on and he makes a deal. And Assad says, yeah, you can take away the chemical weapons. I don't plan on using them anyway. And literally yanked the rug out from under the U.S. war agenda, which didn't stop the U.S. They just said, oh, well, we're going to go in for ISIS and al-Qaeda. And they were still out there saying Assad kept some of his gas. He's gassing his own people. And all we're finding is U.S.-manufactured chemical weapons. Nobody has ever found any evidence that Assad still has chemical weapons or has used them on his own people. It's just another war-starting lie. Oh, the Lusitania was not smuggling weapons when it was sunk. Pearl Harbor was a surprise. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. How many more times do you have to be lied to until you're ready to stand up and say, I will not be lied to anymore by this government and the corporate media? We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And apparently over on CNN, Wolf Blitzer is now trying to say that the Barcelona attack is a copycat of what happened in Charlottesville, which is a bit of a stretch because I don't recall that anybody was tearing down monuments and statues in Barcelona before the van rammed into them. But CNN is continuing its downward spiral. It is now apparently at the number 10 in primetime cable ratings, with more Americans, the people CNN is saying are all fascists, tuning in to History Channel, ESPN, HGTV, and decades-old reruns on Nick at Night. They're all outpulling CNN. I'm not sure. I think I'm outpulling CNN. Let's go to the phones here. Lenny in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing? Hey, listen, I wanna dispute you here on this claim that nobody alive in the United States has ever picked cotton. I can set you up with an interview with quite a few that have.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and if we can get into it after the show, or we can talk personally. But I can easily have you talk with people.
Hang on, Lenny, were they being paid to do so?
Yeah, I didn't say they were slaves. Then, I'm saying you didn't say that they picked cotton as slaves. You said that they had not picked cotton. I'm saying that they have.
Well, I should have. I stand corrected. I should have said they've never been forced to pick cotton. And I believe the first time I used that analogy earlier in the show, I did say it that way. But again, we are all equally slaves to the Federal Reserve right now. But I think they're doing this obsession about the antebellum slavery to keep us from realizing that we are all black and white, brown, red, green, peach, taupe, mauve, and plaid. We are all slaves to the bankers now.
Exactly, and I want to say, and it's true that, you know, in times of war, that blacks sold other blacks on Jewish ships that transported them as slaves. But hey, you have white folks who are selling out white folks right now to the same bankers.
Absolutely.
Okay, so my thing is, what's the difference? But let me say this to a gentleman who called yesterday and said that, you know, nobody black, you know, and I'm proud of white people and what they invented, and I thank God for giving us different people who brought us different things to help evolve humanity. But as far as Eli Whitney, I have a question for him. Do you really think he was running around inventing cotton gins when he wasn't picking any cotton? That's what really happened with that. And you can go and study this in the case history of lawsuits today. Eli Whitney graduated from somewhere up in Harvard or wherever it was up there in the Ivy League school. His sister was at a slave plantation, asked him to come down when he graduated to visit. And when he visited, he saw a black man using something that he had whittled in the form of an afro comb, a wooden afro comb. He was using that to separate the seeds from the cotton. Eli Whitney stole the idea, went back and improved on it, and hence the Eli Whitney cotton gin. But the slave plantation where he stole the idea from the slave sued Eli Whitney for that. You can find this on the books today.
Well, you know, we don't need to go into the specific cases. We know that history very often goes to the wrong inventors. If you read my article on Viking and life on Mars, it's prefaced with all these things, people that we think invented things like the light bulb and the automobile, and then we find out, no, in point of fact, it was actually somebody else.
No, they did.
But there were a huge number of black inventors, and yes, they were denied their proper place in history because of racial bias. If you look at, for example, whaling ship harpoons, the harpoon with the latch, the rotating latch hook on the front, that was invented by a black blacksmith. And it was incredibly popular, and it boosted the whaling industry. And it, you know, his name was almost lost, but fortunately, historians found it again. Anyway, listen, I got to let you go. We're coming up on a break here, and I want to take a phone call from W in Texas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. I just wanted to say, with the whole monuments things and this whole situation. I mean, I'm black. And, you know, I know history. I know history in general was brutal, and I know the slavery situation here in the U.S. was brutal. But, you know, the censorship, you know, where does it end? And I just want to make these points here is that, you know, if you keep saying, okay, well, everything that's Confederates, you know, we have to get rid of, okay, well, where does it end? The Christians during that period, the adherence to Christianity during that period justified slavery. So are we going to get rid of churches? Are we going to get rid of
I made that point the other day because the church tortured my ancestors back in the 1490s. W, do not hang up. We're going to take a commercial break, but I want to come back to you after these few words. And aloha, welcome back to our program. We're talking with W in Texas, and we're talking about monuments, and you're absolutely right. Once this gets going, I mean, it started with the Confederate monuments. Now they're talking about Washington, Lincoln. They're talking about tearing down Teddy Roosevelt because he thinks anybody that moves to this country ought to learn to speak English. And yeah, there's no visible stopping point to any of this nonsense.
Exactly. It's a snowball. And like I said, you know, you could take the Christians of that period that justified slavery. You could take Islam, which had a huge slave trade from Eastern Africa up to North Africa. The Slavic people, my understanding, is a slave, you know, that term means slave because Muslims at that time were slave traders, even up in Eastern Europe. So, I mean, you keep going with this, you're going to get rid of buildings, historical, you're getting rid of county names, city names. It just keeps going and going. Like I said, I'm black, I'm African American, I understand history. I get that. You know, when Russia went from communism when they became a democratic country, they got rid of, you know, Leningrad, named it back to St. Petersburg. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they got rid of statues and things of that nature too, but it's just this snowball effect where you're going to get rid of everything, and before you know it, what history are you going to have left? You're going to have this sort of artificial history left, and that's what is worrying.
You'll be living with a history that's as fake as anything else coming out of the government and the corporate media, and it will be engineered to manipulate and maneuver you. And I think a good example of that would be that Holocaust issue, which clearly there are deficiencies in that story, but it is still protected and supported and promoted because it gives Israel political advantage and financial advantage. And so they're never going to let that one go. And that's why they come down so hard on anybody who dares ask a question about it. Thank you very much, W. We're going to let you go here, and I'm being flooded with emails about all the things that were invented by black people. Like you've probably, at some point in your life, ridden in an Otis elevator. Otis was black. The traffic light was invented by Garrett Morgan. I'm looking over here at Wikipedia. They got a huge, huge list. Henry Blair invented an early version of the spark plug. And there's some amazing stuff here. Otis Boykin, artificial heart pacemaker control unit. Oscar E. Brown, patent for an improved horseshoe. Oh, the fire safe was invented by a guy named Henry Brown. And it goes on and on and on. A lot of the stuff is new technology because of the gradual acceptance of blacks into the higher levels of academia. But there's apparently there was a black inventor at the Bell Laboratories in 1911. Walter Lincoln Hawkins. Oh, NASA's first black female engineer. They made a movie about this recently, came on out. Mary Jackson. In fact, they got all of those ladies in there. So, yeah. That's a good article to look at. So, getting on back here to the situation. Syria is now formally calling on the United Nations to force the United States to stop committing war crimes. Now, unfortunately, the fly in the ointment here is that General Assembly resolutions are non-binding. They are symbolic only. The only force the United Nations has comes out of the Security Council, and the United States has a permanent veto. And I'm sure Nikki Haley will not hesitate to jump up and say, oh, those gosh darn Syrians, they're just full of lies. Veto, 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 veto. But more and more in a future where governments and corporate media do not have the totalitarian control over the writing of history that they have enjoyed in centuries past, history will show it was the United States that brought chemical weapons to the Syrian war and lied to us all about it here. Now, apparently, according to Air Force Chief General Major Amir Eshel in Syria, Israel has attacked Syrian arms convoys nearly 100 times over the last 5 years. That comes on out to 20 sorties a year, or one every 2 months, rather one every 2 weeks, that they just fly on in over the Golan and they just start bombing the Syrian forces. Technically, it's an act of war, but Assad is smart enough to not let himself get sucked into a war with Israel, knowing that the United States is already committed to coming in on the side of Israel against Syria. And by the way, that was what was going on in World War II, when Roosevelt was trying to get the United States into the war to help out Churchill and Stalin. He was literally offering these provocations in the North Atlantic. He was firing on German ships, and the German ships never fired back because Hitler did not want to bring the United States into the war. And that's when Roosevelt concocted that whole thing about provoking Japan into attacking Pearl Harbor and getting into the war that way. Now then, getting on back to Iran, their foreign ministry spokesman Bahram Ghasemi has said the U.S. State Department's annual report on international religious freedoms is unrealistic, unfounded, and biased with certain political goals. Yeah, of course it is. Iran is in the crosshairs. And in the run-up to invading Iran, the U.S. government and the corporate media have to sell you on the idea that those Iranians are mean, nasty, evil people, and they deserve to have their country bombed into rubble. And again, there's a documentary out there called Don't Tell My Mother I'm in Iran. It was shot by a Jewish Israeli documentary filmmaker. And it shows what life is really like in Iran. And everybody's just, they're like us. They want to do their business. They want to make some money. They want to take care of their family. What's wrong with that? Remember that embarrassment some years ago? Israel offered financial inducement to all the Iranian Jews to move to Israel. And the Iranian Jews said, no, we're comfortable here. Nobody bothers us. We've got friends. We've got businesses. We're doing well. One of the world's oldest continually operating synagogues is in Iran. Remember all that talk out there where Ahmadinejad was the new Hitler and they were going to have a new Holocaust and he was going to... And he had all these Jews inside Iran and nothing ever happened. It's like that caller was saying, but we've been hearing that Iran is just weeks away from a nuclear bomb for 30 years. Lie after lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. You got to reach the point where you're going to stand up and say, I'm mad as heck and I'm just not listening to you people anymore. You are full of bovine excrement. So, apparently, aside from oil, ISIS is making an estimated $100 million a year looting and smuggling ancient artifacts from Iraq and Syria, selling them on the black market. Now, the ex-German Chancellor, Gerhard Schroeder, said in an interview with the Swiss newspaper Blick that Russia is not going to change their stance on Crimea. Now, one of the reasons for all the new sanctions on Russia all along is Russia has to give back what they stole, Crimea. But again, you're being lied to. Russia did not steal Crimea. Following the U.S.-backed coup d'etat that put Poroshenko in power in Kiev, the Crimean people said this is obviously not a government that is going to serve us, and they had a referendum to secede, which is their right under the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And the referendum passed with something like 90%. Then they held a second referendum saying we would like to join the Russian Federation. And that referendum also passed. And they knocked on Russia's door and said, we'd like to be friends. Russia said, sure, okay. And that's how it happened. But the United States has taken the position that they do not recognize the right of the Crimean people to have a referendum and vote to secede, even though that is in defiance of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So by default, Russia has stolen Crimea. Now, to see how ridiculous that logic is, this is like saying a guest at a wedding does not recognize the bride's right to choose that particular groom. Therefore, by default, the groom has kidnapped and raped the bride. I mean, that is how ridiculous the logic is behind this U.S. continued claim that Russia stole Crimea. But they're still out there pushing that. How did the United States government come to be such a collection of perpetual troublemakers? Now, apparently, over in Ukraine, this issue about whether or not Ukrainian-made rocket engines have found their way to North Korea, apparently, they're not really sure. And Poroshenko has now ordered a probe into reports that Ukrainian companies are supplying missile technologies to North Korea. Apparently, it was a surprise to him. Was very upset when the New York Times reported it. They were threatening a lawsuit. Then they pulled back off the lawsuit, and today we're hearing they're actually going to have an investigation. It may have been happening. And we know that technology, especially military technology, is a very powerful bartering chip that politicians and world leaders will use all over the place. Again, we know Israel tried to sell a nuclear weapon to the former government of South Africa. We know that during that whole Chinagate scandal, Bill Clinton, as president, was authorizing the transfer of very sensitive military technology to China over the objections of the Defense Department and the intelligence agencies. And in exchange, Chinese money was being funneled into his re-election campaign. And it was called Chinagate. There was supposed to be an investigation, but as is always the case with the Clintons, it never went anywhere. which is why I think it is still legitimate to ask if Hillary Clinton was running the same scam. As Secretary of State, was she selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak private email server to deliver the product, and that so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the money? It's a legitimate question. It needs to be asked, and it deserves an answer. Now, basically, what North Korea has been sending is a message to the United States. Stop holding military drills right on the edge of our country. That's what's making us nervous. There's a whole big ocean out there. You can go play in a lot of other places. But as long as you're operating off our borders, we're going to view it as a prelude to an attack. So show some restraint, or there will be more missile launches. And again, this issue about Guam, there was never going to be an attack. North Korea announced a missile test that would land in waters near Guam. And of course, you were told by the American corporate media North Korea was threatening a strike on Guam. It never happened. You were being lied to again. Now, there's a warning being sounded by South Korea that continued U.S. war games in the area are likely to trigger another North Korea missile test. This is coming from the government of South Korea. And so, of course, the United States says, we will not pause our military drills. We will go wherever we want and do whatever we want. We're the United States of America, and we're invincible, which is kind of a stupid thing to be saying off the coast of Korea because the United States never won that war. And we know they still want to find a way to go into North Korea. Apparently, they did not get a traction with North Korea's nuclear threat because we all remember how we were lied to about Iraq's nuclear threat and Iran's nuclear threat and Syria's gas threat. So we're seeing all these stories coming on out about how Kim Jong-un is torturing people who are practicing the wrong religion, how everybody living in North Korea is functionally his slave. And there was another one that came out earlier that Kim Jong-un is now killing anybody he thinks is not 100% loyal to him. They're just piling it on here. And finally, we have this one. Oh, North Korea has a devastating arsenal of chemical weapons that are going to threaten us. Despite that, China is saying it looks like tensions on the Korean Peninsula are receding. So let's get on down to Venezuela because apparently the U.S. needs to maintain the illusion of an imperial grip. And they're out there, pencils, with these statements. If Venezuela falls, humanity falls. Venezuela is a threat to the United States of America. Actually, in Venezuela right now, they are so hungry. Apparently, people are breaking into the zoos and eating those animals. And if you've got a country that is reduced to that level of desperation, they are not a threat to anybody. But that's not going to stop the U.S. from going on in and saying, yes, we are victorious, as the U.S. always is against weak, helpless countries unable to defend themselves. It really is insane out there. It really is. And I feel bad for the Venezuelans, and I feel bad for the animals in the zoo. And here's a little story. This is worthwhile. Apparently, NASA has always had this practice of putting little tiny plates, discs, with names on the spacecraft. They're shrunk down, microfilm size. And in the old days, you had to actually work on the mission to get on there. More recently, it's become a PR stunt. You can go to NASA's website and you can sign up to have your name put on thus and such spacecraft. I had the names of children of one of our neighbors went up on Curiosity. Claire's actually on the Stardust. That was completely by surprise. Well, now apparently NASA, as a PR stunt, is going to beam your words to the Voyager 1 probe on the 40th anniversary of its launch. And oh my God, am I really that old? And so people are posting to Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook using the hashtag #MessageToVoyager. And the winner, by popular vote, will be broadcast to Voyager. And Voyager will, of course, say, "What the heck is this junk?" Now, my two entries are, to Voyager, that alien probe you're about to crash into, it's a good thing. And my second entry was CD/semicolon remove RM minus RF asterisk. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. I'm going to sneak in some human-caused global warming news. Apparently, some Australian scientists got caught being very creative with the editing of cold temperature data. And apparently, they were simply deleting cold temperature data. They wanted a nice little hockey curve, and the data that didn't match simply got erased. Winston Smith, white courtesy telephone. Winston Smith, white courtesy telephone. And now they've been ordered by their superiors to stop doing that and actually try and get an accurate measure of what's going on. Meanwhile, over there in Greenland, it appears winter has already started to arrive. And Greenland's surface has gained 500 billion tons of ice, 33% above normal. Now, the global warming people like to show you all this footage of the icebergs falling off the edge of the Greenland ice sheet and say, "See, all this ice is coming off. It's losing tons of ice." And, of course, what they don't mention is all the new ice being created in the interior from snow that falls on down and then glaciates. Little inconvenient fact that Al Gore forgets to mention. Meanwhile, up at the North Pole, temperatures have already dropped below freezing, and new interstitial ice will be forming soon. So it looks like Penn Hadow, who said he's going to sail from Alaska to the North Pole to prove the Arctic ice cap is melting, he's got a tough task ahead of him, because it's estimated it's going to take 6 weeks under the best of conditions. 6 weeks sailing in complete darkness through 2-meter thick ice with temperatures at minus 10 degrees centigrade and ice concentrations at 100%. This is going to turn out to be another one of these, "Oh, it didn't work out, come help me, I'm seriously in trouble," with all these other embarrassments there. Over at Hanford, apparently radioactive plutonium and americium are now being detected in air samples. They got a big leak there, and I feel very, very sympathetic to the people living downwind. It's the world's most radioactively contaminated site, although Fukushima is a close number 2. And nobody can do anything about it. You know, let's make a big deal about Confederate statues. We can't stop the radiation. We can't stop any of this stuff. Yeah, the statues. We can prove how butch we are as politicians by taking a position in the Confederate statue issue here. By the way, apparently this university was going to have an event called the Stifling of Free Speech on University Campuses, and then they canceled it. A little bit of irony over there. It does feel like we're descending into madness. And I don't know if it's because we've got lead in the tap water or too many people on prescription antidepressants. But have you ever known such a crazy, wacko time in your life? I haven't. I mean, right now today is making the 60s look like the 50s. We'll be back tomorrow. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller's program here. He's got lots of information. Please share what you learn here with everybody else. We'll be back tomorrow with the lovely Lady Claire. So aloha, America.